Welcome, everyone. You're listening to the ImPerfect Podcast. I'm Kathy.
And I'm Kennedy. Join us on this week's episode as we discuss intriguing topics and people of interest that will inspire us to explore all of the unique pieces of ourselves.
We are all imperfectly perfect.
We're glad you're here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of the ImPerfect Podcast.
Yes, welcome back. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing a guest who has made massive impacts in his own community and has big plans and aspirations for himself. I have had the pleasure of watching this man's desire to help others grow exponentially, even in the few short years that I've grown closer in friendship with him.
Corey is a current university student and a past college student and graduate. He's a humanitarian who is passionate in creating change concerning the environment and equality for everyone. He's one of the most dependable, reliable, and charitable people you'll ever get to meet.
So without further ado, here's Corey. Hey, Corey, how are you?
I'm doing well.
What have you been up to lately?
Well, today I was doing a lot of research on colonialization of Canada, and yeah.
Oh, geez, not what I did today.
Do we have the right guess?
Yeah, no, that's cool though.
Yeah, I'm a tutor or not a tutor, sorry, just a teacher assistant for a first year sociology class, and it's pretty cool. Like, I have to read all the work that they're doing and stuff. And yeah, today they were looking at colonization and discussing how like when Europeans came to Canada, there was approximately like 100 million Indigenous people that were killed, and how they were forced on reserves, and how a lot of people had to be funneled into like the residential school system. And yeah, it's just really cool to be able to see what they're doing as students, and I get to read and mark their grades and stuff. And I remember like sometimes students, there's a lot of grammatical issues and it's hard to read and stuff. And as like a fifth year student, I'm reading this and thinking, like, this is actually kind of rough and it's hard to read. Then I remember just 5 years ago that I could barely put a sentence together too. So it's pretty cool to see the transition that students make in just a short amount of time, right?
Yeah, it goes full circle. And it's interesting what you were going through today, because with my online course, actually right now, I just covered that module about when the Europeans came over and all of that stuff. So anyway,
Right,
interesting.
yeah.
So I'd like to know a little bit more about you personally, Corey. Obviously, you and Kennedy are friends. I've never really met you before. So why don't you tell us what your story is? Like, what was your childhood like? Who was Corey? What are your interests?
Yeah, so I think I have a pretty cool origin story, I guess you could say. I had a troubled teen mother who had me when she was about 20 years old. And she was a single mom, and we moved to Moncton when I was probably, I think, 3 years old, and we lived in Marsh Trailer Park, which I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, though, but it's probably one of the more lower socioeconomic places in Moncton. And yeah, so it was just me and my mom and her big white Great Pyrenees dog, and she met my father. Now not my biological father, but she met her new husband in that same trailer park. And yeah, within a year they got married and had their first kid, and then we moved to Notre Dame in the country, and through the years she had a total of 10 kids.
Wow.
So I'm the oldest of 10 on my mother's side, and in addition to that, she also started a hobby farm that we did a lot of rescues and rehabilitations of like different farm animals. And yeah, we had it open to the public. So it was a very unique way of growing up, I guess you could say.
I would say so.
Yeah.
And that's cool though. And where's your family living now, Corey?
They're in Ontario right now. They're in the process of moving again. I forget the name of I think it's I forget the name of the city, but they're just about 45 minutes outside of Ottawa, and it's pretty cool. Like, I get to go up there every Christmas between university semesters, and me and my brothers, we spend a lot of time hiking mountains in Quebec, like Mont Tremblant. Yeah.
Cool.
So we go on all kinds of big adventures there. Like
Yeah.
I'm 31 now. I'll be 32 when I go up this Christmas, and I still have a sister who's 7 years old.
And I think my age
Yeah.
difference with my sister's a lot. That's crazy, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
bigger age difference between me and the two youngest kids than me and my own mother. Because mom had me when she was about 20,
Wow.
and I think I was 22 and 25 when she had the last two kids.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. So
Yeah.
it's pretty fun at Christmas time, I'm assuming. Lots
yeah.
of craziness.
Oh yeah. It's a
Yeah.
loud house. They have a lot of dogs and stuff too. And we don't do the farm anymore. That's something we got away from just in the last couple of years. She stopped rescuing animals, I think, about 6 years ago, and she let her existing stock that she had just kind of die of old age, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So no new
Yeah.
animals. But she did start a rat sanctuary where she has a couple cages, and yeah, she was rescuing rats or taking in rats from people that couldn't care for them anymore, just couldn't handle having them anymore.
It sounds
So
like we need to interview your mother.
yeah, you for sure.
Oh, you were off to a little bit of a different start than some
Yeah.
people, is what you're trying to tell us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely that's my roots of doing different forms of activism. It was a heavy influence from my own mother and the work that she did. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And she
So
always kind of put an emphasis on trying to do different work and fight for the right to, like, she was all about animals very much, like, and that was kind of my beginning too, was animal rights. And I started getting into environmental rights because it was an interest in high school, but I very much got into human rights as an adult, especially in university.
Wow.
yeah, do you
Yeah.
mind talking a bit more about that, Corey? Because you're studying something to do with that as well, correct?
Yeah, I study sociology, and so sociology is a social science that the short version is that we do research and try to understand our social world. So we try to understand, we look at a lot of social problems in the world according to social identity, such as gender, race, sexuality, age, ability, and so we look at these social inequalities and how they're rooted in like our dominant social systems within our contemporary society, such as patriarchy that privileges men, or white supremacy that privileges white people, and etc.
Mm-hmm.
So what direction are you planning to go with all this? What do you want to be when you grow up, basically?
What do I want to be when I grow up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so like I kind of look at being university educated, especially in this, is to kind of not just to get a job necessarily, but for me, like I got into school, it was almost by an accident, really, because prior to going to university, I worked for a fertilizer factory. In the 8 years that I worked there, like it left me both physically debilitated from an injury there, and I could like definitely say that it was a traumatizing experience insofar as the exploitation, oppression, and just violence that workers experience there.
Mm.
And yeah, one day I heard on the radio that the government was offering free education in New Brunswick for university students. So that was my way out of that place.
Sign me up, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a
Yeah.
great program, even though it's been rolled back to a certain degree now, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But
I was just going to ask you, Corey, it seems to me that did you start in environmental science and then you kind of went elsewhere and where you were interested, or where did you start? Where are you now? Where are you going to end up, kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I studied a lot on the environment in high school. And when I graduated, I left there and went to university. I found sociology by mistake.
Mm,
And one of the first topics they were talking about in my sociology class was worker exploitation. So that was something that I immediately clicked with,
right.
because I had this experience. And because of that connection, I was like hooked on it. And then they just started going into all these other directions, discussing different social identities, right? And the issues associated with those. And that got me into that field. And yeah, but when I graduate, the work that we can do, there's all kinds of work that people can do after they graduate from social sciences. But for myself, like last year I started a nonprofit organization as part of one of my classes,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's called Equity Enterprises. And at Equity Enterprises, we start recycling programs at like major corporations, government institutions, just people's residential homes. And
Mhm.
the money we collect from the recyclable materials that we get, we donate to Crossroads for Women. And basically, when I graduate, I want to keep growing that nonprofit and just see how much more funds we can bring in, how much more community building we can do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So was that, I correct me if I'm wrong again, being your friend, I get bits and pieces. So
Mhm.
was that funded by the university? Like, how did that start? Where was that door open opportunity kind of thing for you?
Yeah, I took a class. It was called service sociology, which is about putting into practice the knowledge that you gain into how to create like material change with people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty cool. We did all kinds of different programs within that class that were like outside of the classroom. Just one example of one activity we did, it was called Pumpkins for Poverty, where a whole group of us went out and we collected a bunch of vegetables from this farm that this woman donated, and we sold them on Main Street in forget the name of the city, but it was in Nova Scotia, and all the money went to their local homelessness shelter. And through that same class, I ended up doing a simple raffle where we were selling baked goods, and I donated all the money to Crossroads for Women. It was very successful. We got $735.
That's
And when I
great.
did that, to fund the baked goods part of this project, my boss at my work was so great, and he donated this 500-pound old metal like farming decoration that I junked up into a bunch of pieces, brought to the scrapyard, and I got like $55 for this huge thing, and that funded that.
That's
And
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I was telling people about this, and people kept trying to give me more scrap metal, beverage containers, etc. And
Uh-huh.
that just like lit a light bulb under my head that I
Uh-huh.
could start these recycling programs and bring in more money.
Of
So this
course.
year alone, in 10 months, we got around $6,000 doing this kind of thing. Yeah.
That's amazing. And this is the second year or
No,
the
this is
first?
only like 10 months in.
Right, right.
Yeah. My
That's
short-term goal is to do 10 grand a year, and my long-term goal is to hit 100 grand a year.
Wow.
yeah. Well,
It
10
Yeah.
grand.
sounds like you're pretty resourceful, chunking up old metal things
Oh yeah. Do
and
that kind of stuff all the time.
that kind of born in your brain an idea to do the recycling project. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what got me actually my boss to give me that was prior to doing this project the summer before. So when COVID-19 hit, it really affected global markets in such a way that the prices of scrap metal like copper, steel, aluminum, all these things skyrocketed to prices never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started going on Facebook Marketplace and looking for people giving away their free dryers and stuff. And I was making quite a bit of money doing this as kind of like a side hustle. And my boss knew I did this kind of thing, and he knew I had that connection to the scrap metal industry. And that's when he said, "You know what? You should take this decoration that can fund this project you're doing." So it's just interesting how these big projects just start very small, and they kind of just grow into something that you weren't even expecting.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah. And I think many things in my life started that way, just very small and almost happened by accident, like becoming a sociologist that's fighting worker exploitation, just recycling old microwaves during the pandemic. And now I
Right.
have this whole organization that's based around that. So, yeah.
Mm.
So cool.
So is that what keeps you going? Like thinking of ideas, or is it more about helping others?
So personally, it's just like if you take all the science and the community building aside, like this is fun for me. I think it's fun. I love making connections with new people, telling about these projects, trying to deconstruct notions about social identity that are problematic, and just being out in the world, making things happen, making those connections. It's fun for me, but yeah, like when it comes to personal growth and doing things, like I try not to focus too much on like my own individual life when it comes to like I don't have these aspirations to be like a millionaire or anything like that. But I guess my aspiration is to do community building because like I grew up in Moncton, grew up in a lower socioeconomic neighborhood and want to develop those changes. So that's kind of my driving force behind all of it. But yeah, it's also a lot of fun too. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
so is this what makes you feel like your best self, or do you have a specific interest or hobby that you love to do? Like, is this all your focus all the time, or do you like to do little things on the side too?
I like doing all kinds of stuff. Like I told you before, when I'm on my downtime, I'm with my brothers, I'm with my friends, I'm hiking, I'm in nature. I love that stuff. I love it. But yeah, like my main aspiration in life is I think my strongest thing that I'm focused on is social justice because I want to see a world where there's no more social stratification, no more exploitation, no more inequalities. And I think that life for all would be better, including myself, right? Because I
Mhm.
just know growing up lower socioeconomic and I've experienced other forms of oppression according to like my sexuality and mental illness and stuff like that. So that's my main driving force is to fight for the better tomorrow.
Yeah. And if I
Yeah.
know anybody that's out there and getting it, so to speak, it's you. If you ever need Corey to give you a recommendation on whatever, or if something needs to happen, like immediately Corey's the first one I think of in my head because he's out there and he's getting it and he's doing it. Yeah.
Right. So
We try.
Corey, oh, sorry.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
gonna say we try to make a lot happen with not a lot because like myself, like I don't have that much resources, but I think you said earlier, it's about being resourceful.
Hmm.
And yeah, I signed up for that grant and we got a $5,000 grant from TD to start like our nonprofit. And the first thing I bought was the smallest utility trailer we could buy from Home Depot. And just with that small trailer, like we made all this money. And like you were saying about like when people need help and stuff, sometimes we help lower socioeconomic individuals move from problematic situations and stuff. So we try to do a lot with the little that we have.
It's good though.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was going to ask, what is the most important thing you've learned in life?
The most important thing I learned,
It's a big
um,
question.
It is.
yeah, I think it's the sociological imagination is the most important thing I learned, and I'll explain that. When in our first year of university, like I kind of went through life, and one of our dominant narratives in our capitalistic society is the focus on the individual, and that the individual is basically entirely responsible for their own destiny.
Hmm.
But when I got into sociology, we learned about social processes in life and how social processes and systems of power privilege certain groups that like negatively impact their lives in such a way that's out of their control.
Mhm.
And by having this new kind of perspective in life and seeing the world through this new kind of uh just a social perspective instead of an individual perspective, that just changed the entire way that I see life in general. And it's very much for the better.
Hmm. Hmm. So, I guess the big question we want to ask is, what makes you imperfect?
Um, that's a good question.
Nothing's
And
imperfect about me.
I think I have a good answer for that question.
Okay.
It's that same professor that I had that got me into that class that I was able to start my nonprofit. She was very much interested in making us being introspective of our lives and how we make mistakes. And one of the biggest mistakes in my life, or things that I wasn't necessarily doing that was the best, is how I approach problematic attitudes in people. So I'll give an example. There was one day there was a couple that was screaming at one of my lower socioeconomic friends, calling them every name in the book, basically, calling them a drug addict and myself, despite not doing drugs or anything, just because of our physical appearance, because we're a little bit just rough around the edges, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
And so problematically, I kind of told these people off, right? That I didn't think that was the best approach. Like, instead, I should have brought them in rather than pushed them out and explained in a calm manner, like, listen, we're just normal citizens, and I think you're discriminating against us according to class stereotypes. And that may have changed their perspective for the better, which would have maybe changed their behavior in the future with people according to class. But I think by responding in an aggressive manner, I may have made their feelings worse towards lower socioeconomic people. So that's one of the biggest things I learned from my professor, is to take people in rather than push them away when you're in situations like that. So I think that's what makes me imperfect, is that when I see somebody doing something sexist, racist, homophobic, etc., I've responded in a kind of aggressive manner, but that's something I've been working on in my life.
That's a really good answer. And it's a good perspective to have, because automatically everyone's reaction is to go on the defense. And I mean, I often find myself too in situations where I'll get aggravated or something, and then I find myself having to call the person after the fact or text them and say, I'm sorry, I was kind of a jerk, but
Yeah.
no. And
Introspection is a big skill, Corey.
yeah. Yeah. So that's awesome. Well, I think all of the stuff that you're doing is great. I said to Mom, I was like, we have to interview Corey. Like, he's got so much to say. He's got so much knowledge. He is doing amazing things. So we really appreciate you taking the time today to have a little chat with us and share a bit of Corey's story. So thanks so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
If you or someone you know has a unique story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at theimperfectpodcast@outlook.com.
For more information and how to connect with us on social media, you can visit us at our website, theimperfectpodcast.ca.
And from whichever platform you are listening to this episode, be sure to like, share, and leave us a review. We would really appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
We look forward to hearing your feedback and seeing you all find that extra joy and embrace your own imperfect.
See you next week.